everyone, this is Emily Jane Acree.
And Adam Price.
And you're listening to the Relative Rhythms Podcast.
Today we're excited to introduce to you tap dancer, musician, and educator, Ian Berg.
Ian teaches tap all over the Boston area, including at Emerson College and Tufts University. He is also the founder and driving force behind the tap company Subject Matter. The company has performed at venues and festivals across the U.S., including at Joe's Pub in New York City and Jacob's Pillow.
Ian is unique in that his undergrad was in dance, and then he got his master's in music as a tap dancer from Berkeley. His company has just released a full-length album of jazz standards entitled Songbook, and they have another album planned for release in the summer of 2025.
We talk about composing music for tap, how tap fits into a live music ensemble, some great exercises for musicians and tap dancers, and his experiences and insights into the recording process of his recent release, as well as his upcoming album with his company Subject Matter.
Please welcome to the podcast, Ian Berg. Ian Berg, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
We usually start our episodes asking our guests how they first came to their art form and when they decided to pursue it as a career.
So when I was a little kid, I just had a lot of energy all the time. And so my mother was looking for stuff to put me in. And it was the third thing she put me in. And I was like, this is it. I do this now. And this is what I want to do forever.
That's awesome.
You knew right then.
Yeah, pretty much.
Wow.
Really loved it.
That.
And then later on, I did a lot of modern and contemporary dance and ballet. And then I also played percussion and did some composition in my high school in their music program. Cool. And so I really had and have a passion for making music and moving and making dance, and tap dance is you get to do both at the same time, and it's just great.
Yeah. Did you think of that right away as a little kid? Were you I'm making music, or were you just I'm getting my energy out, I
don't know. That's such a good question. I remember when I started to learn do improvisation and stuff when I was in middle school. I was oh, this feels like making music.
Yeah. Also awesome that you came to improvisation so early. I feel for me, it was much later. It was much later. It was not even talked about. So that's cool that it was part of your experience, and then also part of your experience in high school with your music and percussion as well. So that's cool. I
had a really great tap teacher when I was in late elementary school and middle school by the name of Julie Cartier in Chicago, who just steered all of us in all of the right directions. And it was through her that I started going to the CHRP festival in Chicago growing up. And that's where I met all the, once you meet all those people, it's how could you not be this is amazing. I want to just do this all the time. Yeah.
All right. You can't stop after that. It's here we go.
So you went to undergrad for dance. Was it specific to tap, or was just all dance?
It was actually not even there was my freshman year, I took one semester of beginner tap dance with Julia Boynton, who was teaching the tap dance elective at the conservatory at the time. And that's it. That was my only tap dance class that I took in my undergrad. Everything else, contemporary dance, ballet, modern dance, contact improvisation kind of stuff. But my area of emphasis was in composition, in dance composition. And I was allowed for all of those projects to work in tap dance, which was great. And there were a lot of people that would later, this was pre-subject matter, but a lot of people that would become subject matter people that were just kind of in the community looking for stuff to do. So they would, I would just have them in my composition projects.
That's awesome.
Which was great. It was really fun. But yeah, it was really not a tap dance program at all, barely any
Interesting.
And in my 2 years, they didn't even have the tap dance elective anymore. That's how. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Can I ask why you chose to go there as opposed to a different university with a better tap program?
At that point in my life, I was really invested in like ballet and contemporary dance. And I was also, of all of the programs that I got into and was looking at, the Boston Conservatory is the only one that was like in a major city that had tap dance. So I was like, let me go somewhere where there are people tap dancing and there are classes and I can make it work that way.
Interesting.
Right, because then you can add in the tap classes from outside the university that you need.
Which is very common, I think, for a lot of tap dancers that are going into higher education.
You're really invested in going into the contemporary route. What kind of switched?
That's a really good and tough question. I became, I think, really disillusioned with the physical technique of and politics of like ballet as a form of dance. And I think that really pushed me away from that side of the dance world. I was a Joffrey kid, and through high school, I was like at the Joffrey Academy in Chicago, like, ballet class 6 times a week. I was like really in it. And, I just realized that when you go to college, you realize, you start to like build your own identity as a person. You realize what types of things are important to you. And I was realizing that the types of things that I was interested in were not only not present oftentimes in a ballet or a contemporary dance kind of scenario, but like actually frequently anti those things.
Like what?
The hierarchy, the rigidity, the like kind of in a lot of parts of the ballet world, I feel like there's this like emphasis on hierarchy is okay with a lot of different kind of forms of abuse that wouldn't be okay in other kinds of dance or other communities. So obviously I wasn't into that. And also I was realizing more and more that the ways of moving in ballet just weren't working for my body. And when I stopped taking ballet really seriously, a lot of like long-term injuries that I had kind of just disappeared.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also just like, along with the kind of like systemic abuse, there's like just a lot of like, sexism and racism and transphobia and stuff. That's just like kind of part of the ballet tradition.
Yeah.
Right.
And so, when you go back and read a book about, hugely important ballet choreographers, and they say things like, the ballerina's skin should be the same color as the inside of an apple. And maybe it's not, maybe that's not great.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's a lot of what pushed me away. I became really interested in college in more like postmodern dance kind of ideologies and modalities. And I think those things have really had a huge influence on the way that I think about like making tap dances. And I'm really interested in that like release technique and things like that as a way to think about moving that is maybe more relevant to tap dance. Also, like obviously all of these like Afro diasporic forms, but like maybe the center isn't ballet, but ballet is actually this like cultural dance that's coming out of Europe, and it's not like where everything comes off of.
You talk about the release technique and like postmodern and modern dance styles, like that all came from Afro diasporic dances, originally. So it's not so far separated than we think it is.
So can you guys just like explain some of that to someone who might not know?
the non-dancer in the room.
The non-dancer in the room.
If you think about Sam Weber's loose ankle technique, this is the way I like to think about it, like in a tap dance way. if you think about Sam Weber's loose ankle technique is applied to the whole body, and thinking about like, how can I maximize these forces that are already at play in our world, like gravity, and how can I like use the shape and the structure of my body to swing my arms to get around instead of tensing all my muscles and then going like that. I think is a good way of thinking kind of the general release technique kind of ideology. So it's about, and you find that a lot in different Afro-diasporic dances where it's not about, but it's about finding the moments of release as you like move through space.
And less about fitting into matching bodies, right? They don't have that like, it must be here, it must be here. Like as it is, you find your movement through the release as opposed to you find what you're supposed to look like through matching somebody else.
And that's what one of the things, not one of the 1,000 things I always loved about tap dance is there's like a million correct tap dance techniques. And different things have different names depending on where you live. I love those kind of like, it's so specific to people's bodies and it's so specific to like little communities. I've always loved that about tap dancing.
Yeah. This is really interesting. I'm just thinking about this right now. I've never heard about this like release technique, but as a music educator, a lot of my students, and myself included, something that I've had to unlearn from years of training, there's a lot of tension in our bodies, especially just learning in a classical way. And I'm wondering if it's more of just a European approach to education. You just talking about that made me think about all my students who struggle with like severe tension issues and the injuries that come with them.
I think you brought up a good point when you said just about like European learning models in general, because if you think about like how we learn in the traditional like school setting, we're very much like here for 8 hours of the day, as a person who works, I'm a personal trainer, so I work with a lot of people's bodies, and like I see it's just like, oh, these kids who have so many injuries, I'm like, if we just moved a little bit more, so much of that would be mitigated or diminished. And so I think you're right, Adam. I think it had a lot to do with how we learn and how we're taught. We learn the best this way, and it's maybe not true.
And also in a more specific kind of jazz context too, like, this was a music that when it started, a lot of it was happening in marching bands. It was people that were walking around playing their instruments. And so like that's a huge part of, how the music developed. So it's, in my master's program, Danila would have like oftentimes when the horn players were soloing, they'd be walking around the room, like marching around the room. Like
interesting.
They would not be just sitting or standing. They would actually be like going somewhere else to get that whole body just like activated.
So you got your master's in music. So undergrad in dance and master's in music. Why did you choose to do that? That's really interesting.
I think, I wanted to have a really good, not just understanding of the tap dancing that I do, but also the constituent elements that make it up. So I wanted to like have a really good understanding of like my body, how I like to move it, different modalities of moving it, and like a really good understanding of like dance composition and sort of those types of things that I was interested in, organizing people on stage. And then, also like go and actually like go to school for music and like, working on composition and all of this different stuff and like be in an ensemble, like not like, they had a evening where there's the big band and then one of the tunes, the tap dancer comes out and they go crazy and everyone loves it. And then you go and you do whatever you want the whole time. But like so it's me and a drummer and like a flute player. And like, how do we all live together? And then how do you write music where it's not just, because the tap dance instrument is its place, its role in the ensemble is weird. And every time you walk into a room, someone has a different kind of understanding or idea about what you should be doing. And sometimes it's like, you know, they just thought of it and they're like, oh, you should be like a conga player. Like, okay, well, and also people have done stuff like that before. So you're not just like the first person thinking that, but, like have a really strong kind of idea of what your role is in any given ensemble, and then write music that creates those roles for you so that other people that can then hear it too.
Yeah, I love that. That's actually one thing I wanted to ask you about, was how that experience was for you, living in that ensemble. And do you have any goals or aspirations to then have the music that you've written out there for other tap dancers to transcribe or other ensembles to work on?
That's a great question. A lot in we were in, like, you know, an ensemble each semester, and that whole, like, tap dancers don't, we spend so much time learning to, if we have like a tap dance teacher that works on thinking about the dancing as music, we still only get to be in rooms with people that play the same instrument that we do. So, you know, being like in that room, seeing what's working, seeing what's not. Maybe on this tune I can take this role, on this tune you can take that role. It's like you and, you know, finding a way to like walk into a room and look at, like, talk to the drummer and be like, okay, so like anytime you're playing on the rims there, I can't, you just like take me out of the picture. And so what kind of things can you play that complement the things that I play, but also leave space for me? And then how can you communicate to people that it's like, so sometimes I would like to have a solo that's like a drum solo where it's like, you know, like a 4-chord vamp that's just like over and over. But sometimes I'd like to solo on the form, and that would be really nice too. Trying to communicate and, you know, make people understand that this is an instrument that has a history, that, like, you know, a lot of people have played tap dancing in a lot of different musical scenarios, and there are ways that people have played it, and this didn't just drop out of the sky. So how can we like reference those kind of like historical ways that tap dance has been played? But also it's like, what if we also did this a little bit and that a little bit? Like, that would be really cool too. And this program in particular was great because the emphasis was on jazz, yes, but also it was like really international. And so there were a lot of people that were bringing their like kind of elements of their different folkloric musics from the countries they lived in. So it was like, you know, there are so many different models for music with multiple percussionists. So how can we take elements of those things and adapt them for this scenario where we have multiple percussionists?
Yeah.
Did you ever get any like pushback?
Guest artist that we had at one point in like the second week turned to me and he was like, do you think you could shut up sometimes? Like he was like telling me to play less, but I was like, that was really good. It was extremely helpful. Just to be like, oh yeah, a different guy a few weeks later was like, in a more diplomatic way, was like, what if instead of playing all the time or not playing at all, you thought, okay, here's a moment where my entrance into this music can give it like a little lift so that we're like building to something. And then the tap dancing comes in and it's like, whoa, it's even more like, or, you know, is there a way that the drummer can do a similar thing? Leave it to just like the tap dancer and the pianist and the soloist to like have a moment, like different thinking about things when you're on the bandstand, you're playing standards or whatever, thinking about those types of moments orchestrationally and not just like, oh, I get to like go take a killing solo, and then I get to keep soloing over the other people's solos and do all this, but like how can I contribute to the bigger picture of the music that's being played? And how can I not just in a way that's thinking about the energy, but in a way that's like thinking about like the different kind of like tonal ranges or timbres, and what kinds of sounds do I have at my disposal, and when can those be helpful and when can those not be helpful? And then thinking about different brushes and scrapes and things like that as like different colors that you have, and then trying to make like technical exercises for yourself that give you as much control over those kinds of sounds as you have over the other kinds of like more conventional tap dance sounds that you think of.
Yeah. Did you ever play around with like similarly how maybe a drummer would have different brushes or different tools? Did you play around with, say, wooden shoes or different kinds of shoes to get that, or were you strictly with your tap shoes?
It was suggested to me many times by many people. Or like, what if you had a little piece of metal on the like side of the board, or like a different some kinds of textures? And I think sometimes the thing that people like the least about tap dancing is the sound of tap dancing. And I think sometimes when people start to make like foot percussion music, or specifically tap dance music, the taps are the first thing to go. Or sometimes when people like musicians hear tap dancing, the thing that turns them off about it is the sound of the taps. So I really wanted to make that work for myself and for other people. So like this, the music that I wrote for my master's thesis, and that will be the second record that will come out next year, that is all taps on the shoes, and it's orchestrating and arranging around that sound and that instrument, and not like altering it or like later. But I really like the sound of tap dancing, and I want to write and arrange and orchestrate music that highlights that sound and gets other people to go like, oh, okay, in the same way that like tap dancers do.
Obviously, you've had all this years of training in dance, and then you go to get your master's in music at a great music school. Was there things that like really took you like by surprise, or like threw you off balance, or like made you pause and like say, oh, I never thought of that? Was there anything like you that really surprised you going in?
I've been meaning to like sort of go on a crusade about this, but I think this is probably better time than any. I think tap dancers need to start really thinking seriously about their hearing health long term, because I think it's super important. And I think we're in a lot of very loud environments, just tap dancing all the time. You go to these festivals, it's loud. Like most studios don't have soundproofing on the walls. It's just like loud all the time. And I think it's super important. So yeah, like experience that I had in my master's program is I have like 75% hearing loss in my right ear just from birth. So I wear a hearing aid, and after like one of the rooms that we were in, the ensemble rooms was really small. The drummer was quite loud, and so it like now I have tinnitus. I didn't when I went into the program.
Wow.
And I'm sure that I have some noise related hearing loss from just even that like 2 months in that room.
Wow.
And I got less hearing to lose than some other people, so right. It's pretty scary. But I just that's something that's been on my mind a lot recently. I've been like diligent about my earplugs and that kind of stuff, and so I think we're just used to being in some very loud rooms and environments sometimes. And I think part of it is on the like dancer to think about like maybe you should wear earplugs in some scenarios and that kind of stuff. But it's also on the people who like own the dance studios to actually like put the appropriate soundproofing stuff on the walls in their studios and not be blasting the music all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's one thing. The other thing that was really interesting was there was sort of a generational divide between the faculty and the students in terms of just like having had experience playing with tap dancers before. So like a lot of the faculty and the guest faculty were like, oh yeah, this is like, have you, which could be good or bad because oftentimes their experience was with like 1 or 2 tap dancers, not like a lot. And either their experience was very good or very not good. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot of people that were coming in. They were like, yeah, this is awesome. I'm so happy to see this here. And there were a lot of people that were like, oh, brother, like, so there was that, which was interesting to see how like just across the board, every kind of guest teacher that came in had played with a tap dancer like a few times before, but none of the students had, like none of my classmates had played with a tap dancer before pretty much, or a lot of them didn't even know it was a part of the thing. A few people did, but like, yeah, the drummers obviously were like the ones that were like getting it the quickest. They were like, oh, but I think a lot of people have a hard time understanding the role that tap dancers are taught to have as a person that's playing in like jazz or improvised music, which is like a soloist, like a horn player. And I think people have a hard time understanding that is how it has been and how it can be. And also hearing like a tap dancer take a solo in the same kind of way they would hear a horn player take a solo. Just because they're not used to those sounds doing that.
Sure.
And sometimes it would be really interesting because there would be scenarios where, there was a rhythm that I was supposed to play to like cue in the whatever, or I was doing, David Dance Before the Lord with like the choir and the whole, It was great.
That's awesome, dude.
Very fun.
That's very cool.
How cool.
And like, you take a little solo up front and then you get into, you set the time so that the band can come in. And I was playing like the spang lang, the like ride cymbal. And the conductor was like looking at me like, are you gonna bring us into time? And I was like, if I was playing this rhythm on a ride cymbal, the exact same thing I'm playing, they would go, oh yeah, I hear that. But like, because it's tap dancing, they're not like registering that's the same rhythm. And that would come up. That came up a few times in the master's program too, where it's like they wouldn't be hearing that the tap dance was playing that thing that they know really well.
Right.
Which is interesting.
Because it's not on a cymbal, so the timbre is different, so they're not registering it maybe, or?
I guess, yeah.
Yeah.
But I think as tap dancers, we need to be used to walking into those musical environments with like a lot of grace, because a lot of those people, it's the first time they've ever not even played with tap dance, but known that a tap dance is part of the music that they play.
This is the Relative Rhythms podcast, and you're listening to our conversation with Ian Berg. This podcast is a labor of love, and we are currently supported entirely by our listeners. If you like what you hear and would like to support us, please consider subscribing to our Patreon. By doing so, you gain access to all of our uncut interviews and extra content. You can sign up at patreon.com/relativerhythms. You can also support us by rating and leaving us a review wherever you are listening, and by following us on all the socials at Relative Rhythms. Thanks for tuning in, and now back to our conversation with Ian. You were talking about educating musicians in the room especially those who might not know that tap is a part of jazz history. On the flip side of that, how are you teaching your tap students their history as well, and how to be involved and step into music places without becoming the stereotypical like tap over everything kind of deal?
Yeah. I have a student at MIT, and she is in the like advanced music, like jazz class that's run by Miguel Zenon, which is pretty crazy.
Nice.
Sounds awesome.
Yeah. And so I teach her privates through that class. Like she gets like private instruction through that, which was in my master's program. The other thing that was like really amazing is I got to take like private lessons, which you don't get in dance school. Like at all.
Why not? That's a good question.
Right. Well, it's because
that's another question.
because the rooms are so big. So I'm teaching her. She's in an ensemble as a tap dancer. The ensemble has a drummer. Like she has to bring music like that she composes for class and stuff, and like different arrangements and stuff. And so that's awesome. It's really nice to like, you know, all of this stuff that I was like trying to figure out for myself in this program at Berkeley is like, okay, so how do I not only like help this other person through it, but how do I like make exercises that like we can work on in the privates that like get after these certain things, or like what kind of music can I like, you know, send to her to listen to kind of get acclimated to thinking about playing in this kind of way. So that's been really nice. And I also have a Monday night class here in Boston where we do a lot of exercises that are kind of focused on like developing our ear for comping. How do I like, you know, how do I hear someone else's playing and like try and help them get to where they want to go? Or how do I get out of their way when it's not my time to be playing? Because we don't often get the chance to like develop our ears as tap dancers. We do a lot of playing out, but we don't do a lot of like hearing and responding to things, especially like at the level that like a horn player, like a jazz musician is playing. And then also a lot of work on building, when you're improvising, playing phrases that are like thematic, relevant to the like the melody of the tune that you're playing, and long, that aren't just like an 8-bar thing and then another 8-bar thing and then another 8-bar thing, but like how can I play like 2 choruses and just it keeps like developing. So like making exercises that work on those types of things has been like a staple of the Monday night class that I teach here.
Yeah. I feel like we, even as improvisation is getting to be more common in tap dance settings, it's still, like you said, kind of more of a short form, whether it's go around the circle or however it's structured. But you're right. We don't have a whole lot of practice of like, what does it mean to develop a solo? Like, what does that mean to have like an overarching theme that is an idea that you build on? And instead of like, oh, I just gotta get my 8 bars and then pass it on and don't think about, well, where was that going, or what was the trajectory of the solo, and did it make sense?
I wonder like when's that supposed to happen, because it's so improvisation is so scary for a lot of people at first. I also don't know if like every tap dance student needs that from the jump, but at some point you can take like the students that are interested in working on that kind of thing and sort of shift them towards on big phrases.
That's a question for you that Adam and I often talk about is, you know, Adam as a musician is like, well, tap is music and I love tap as music. And I'm like, but it's also all of these other things that I love. And so how do you like meet in the middle do you have students in your class that maybe are interested in other avenues of tap dance, and how do you navigate that?
The capacity that I teach at Emerson is in the musical theater program. There are just so many different facets to this art form. And in different scenarios, sometimes you have to go like, okay, so you want to book that gig. So the thing that when you do your double pirouette and then you do your double time step and you like say your name, the thing that's gonna like set you apart from other people isn't the speed with which you do that double time step, but it's going to be the clarity with which you do that double time step. So like, let's work on making sure that every sound is its own separate, clear tone, so that when you tap dance, people go, oh, they know what they're doing. And in that scenario, it's really great because they've taken like a year of music theory before they have me. So like we actually come in and like we're like sight reading some stuff. We'll like sight read a passage and sing it together. At the end of every semester, I teach a Leon Collins routine, and so I'll like come in, I'll like write it up, notate it on the board, and then we'll like clap through it, and then we'll dance it.
That's awesome.
I've been in a lot of scenarios where sometimes the thing that I am bringing to the table, the thing that I have to offer, is just not something that the people in the room are very interested in having. And those are scenarios that I try and go like, I think Sandra said this is like, this is not my room. Like that's cool. And I love to dance and I love to move around and I like to do like crazy steps and think about like how you could flip this and the musical side of things. But like I could just do the musical side of things without the other side all the time. But like the music part has to be there. I couldn't just like, teach a tap dance class that's like all about the movement and like you're not like the music that they're playing with their feet is like all sorts of crazy. Like I couldn't do that.
Right.
Oh, do you want to hear about this exercise though?
Yeah.
Yes. So the one that we've been using is, so you'll pick, there's a few of them. Danilo, who's the guy who ran my master's program, Danilo Perez. I don't know if the tap dancers who listen to this know about, but you should listen to his music. It's like amazing. He would do this exercise where you would start a phrase, but you'd like start on the and before one, and then you'd start on one, and then you'd start on the and of one, and then but improvising, playing little lines, and then hearing what kinds of ideas you want to play starting on those different beats, and just like as a way to get to know a little bit more about yourself. You're like, I love to start on the ones, and when I started on the one, I like to do this on the two, and I like to make the start of my phrases do these things. But what if I start on the like four? How does that change all of the rest of the stuff that I do? And then like record it and listen back to it, and then try and do the one stuff starting on the four and the four stuff starting on the one, and hear how that changes your ear. So I have an exercise you play. You start on one of the first bar and on four of a fourth bar. You play all of the 16th notes in the middle. And then you have to start on one of the first bar and end on four of the last bar, and you can play anything you want in the middle, but they have to kind of be on the 16th note grid. And then you do the same thing, but you start on the E of one and end on the E of four. And then you make your way through the
Interesting.
And so it's about like being able to like not just start on one and end on four, but like start on that like, before the two and end right before the one on that of the four. And feel comfortable doing that. And then it's like, okay, if I'm starting on that of one, what kind of stuff does that make me want to do? What kind of syncopations does that make me want to play? And then can I still pick out that last thing at the end of it? Can I not get lost? So yeah, a really nice way to do that too is like pick a tune that has different changes, and work on soloing, like starting like the full bar before the beginning of the phrase and then ending like a bar before the end of the phrase you're playing, and then like move up through all those 16th notes or triplets with that, and really get a good ear for like sitting in all those syncopations, starting and ending in weird places, but also like knowing where you are in the form without starting on the one of that first bar at the beginning of the form. Because I think as in terms of developing our ears, tap dancers could spend a lot more time like learning changes and learning how to like hear changes and not be like, I have to count. A few weeks ago, someone was like, so how do you, like, when you're improvising, how much counting are you doing? I'm like, never any counting ever. Just like, you want to hear the changes and hear how they make you feel and know where you are, and then be able to make choices in that way. But like, yeah. And then the other exercise is this good radio?
This is good. I love it. I'm here for it. Yeah.
The other good exercise that I really like is, so you'll get, if you have a circle, you'll get the circle stomping on like the and of 2. So like 1, 2, 3, 4, and then do that like every other bar. So it'd be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3. You do that for 8 bars, and that and of 2 needs to be like, that's the focal point of the person who's improvising's phrase. Like, they don't have to play it every time, but their phrase has to be like, that's the sun to the phrase's solar system. It has to be gravitating around that idea. And so you do that for a while. And then what you do is you pick another count. So you could say it's the and of 4, right? And so you play the first 8 bars like that. And then the second 8 bars, the only thing anyone plays is that and of 4 all the way at the end of that 8th bar. And it's their job, the improviser, to make that and of 4 of that 8th bar on the second phrase, to make it make sense, to make it the new sun, to make it the new thing that the phrase gravitates around. And so they have to take that way they were phrasing in that first part and turn it and change it and make it so that and of 4 is like the only logical conclusion for the way that the phrase is supposed to end at the very end.
These are great.
I've been working on them.
Awesome.
But yeah, those are some exercises like straight out of my Monday night classes that we've been working on, trying to like think about phrasing, making big phrases instead of just 2 bars here and 2 bars there.
Yeah, I love that.
We should have an episode where everyone just gets on and shares their best exercises.
Their favorite exercise. I love that.
I love a nice exercise where some of these, my only problem with these is they require like a little too much explanation.
I think even though these ideas are not new, like you said, none of this is new. It is a little bit kind of new for people who are coming from like a Western traditional studio setting. So
a commercialized studio set.
Right.
Yeah.
Not new, but not commonplace.
Yeah, for sure.
Also, I hear and feel, especially listening to the different guests that you've had on here, talking about like not trying to like intellectualize things or academicize things too much to the point where it but I see the different kinds of exercises or different kinds of like working on different things as like you work on those things and then eventually you get past it. And it's just, they've like taught you how to feel, they've taught you how to hear things a little bit differently than you were hearing before. But sometimes you need to like make a little system so that you can get beyond, if that makes like,
I love the system.
Get your ear to a new place. But I definitely don't want people to be like dancing and thinking about like the and of 2 like all the time. Like I don't want that, but I want to like be developing your ear and developing your feet to a place that like you're landing on places in the beat and in the bar that you weren't before.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the goal of anything. Like you practice your scales, not so you can practice your scales, but so you can get it in your body, Yep. So you are releasing an album in November and another one hopefully in next summer. And you arranged all the music for your first album and composed and arranged all your music for the second album, correct? Yeah,
there is a dear friend of mine that I called in to do some of the arranging for the second album. But yes.
Cool.
Yeah.
Can you talk to me how you compose and arrange with tap dance as instruments and how you just compose as a musician. Do you compose on a piano, or like just talk me through it?
Yeah, I compose on my little piano that's over there next to the cat. And when I was first getting back into composing for my master's program and stuff, I was writing music that like I was liking the music, but it didn't make me want to dance. So a lot of the adjustment came with like, how can I find some harmonic language that like makes me feel like I want to dance, and like what tunes do I listen to that make me want to dance, and then can I go transcribe them and go like, okay, what's happening here, how can I bring that into this. Tap dance as an instrument is like so short, right? The notes are like super short for the most part, and like high and like metallic. So it's, for me, the arranging is like, how can I in moments utilize that in joint or in unison with other things, and then how in other moments can I let other things do other things while the tap dance sounds like tap dancing. So it's like that for me, for a lot of the arranging, and the drummers that we work with are angels, because they read my like through composed drum charts.
Oh wow.
Like through composed fills and stuff, which is like,
man.
Yeah,
I'm sure they love that.
they really do.
No.
The one that's on the second album, he's been playing this music like all through the master's program, and he was in my ensemble my second semester and stuff, and he's great, and he's like, yeah, let's do it, you want me like so I used to play drum set, which helps a little bit. So I'll be writing it, I'll be like choreographing, and then it's like, you're working on choreography, and then you're like, the choreography is going this other direction, but you hear in the phrasing that there was this like beat that would have been really nice to end that last phrase, but the tap dancing started to go in a different direction. It was like, let's put that in the drums. Let's put that, like, let's make that happen, that little fill, finish the other phrase that the tap dancers were just playing as the tap dancers go in a different direction. Or lots of like through composed trading between tap dance and drums, or unison lines with tap dance and drums, where it's but the drums are playing like with mallets or with brushes, or snare off, kind of thinking about all of the different sounds that the drum set can make, and how can those sounds like complement the sounds that the tap dance makes too. So I've been thinking about, how do you justify 3 tap dancers playing the same thing at the same time when you're just listening to it. But it's, on a lot of like pop records, they'll have like the singer sing the same thing twice over, same like melody, same line, no harmonies or anything, just to like make it feel like thicker and fuller, and
like gang vocals kind of deal.
Exactly. And it really does do something to have like the moments where there are multiple tap dancers is not like it brings a different energy. There is a reason to do it, but also a lot of the stuff on the second album with Farhand is really counterpointed. Like there's a lot of different people playing different things at the same times, or like on the staged version, it's like as you're going up this diagonal, you'll play a little bit of something, and then you'll exit the stage, and then you'll enter 2.5 bars later and do this thing, and that, but someone's playing something in the middle. So it's like taking lines up and making it for multiple people, or like which is fun. And then we were recording, and I was like, we're going to have to do some really serious panning to make it clear that it's multiple people. But we're going to like, because if everyone was in both ears, it would just sound like one person doing one line. But when you really pan it, it's hopefully going to sound, you're going to be able to hear that it's different people. And we're wearing different shoes that sound really different.
Cool.
But yeah, on the With Farhand album, there's a lot of horn lines, like melodies that are really like soaring long tones, because the tap dancers can't do that. But then the tap dancers, we fill in all the little stuff that's in the middle. So those are kind of the big picture things. And then also thinking about, like, you know, with horn players, you have all sorts of, you like double this with that and double this with that, and that makes this sort of sound. And so like, what, you know, how can you could put tap dance with what, and then it would make this kind of third thing. So experimenting with those kind of things. Some like upper, like really high register piano and tap dancing, trying to make it sound like the tap dancing is playing the melody.
Nice.
Those kinds of things. But you know, it's like
cool.
It's really fun.
Yeah.
It's like a lot of like seeing like this will sound really good, and then you get in the room and it's like, nah, it's not what we thought it would be. But then some other stuff that just kind of happens and you're like, wow, cool. That like we could write a whole tune around this kind of idea.
Nice.
So yeah, lots of that, and lots of trying to make like write weird forms, but where the chords resolve in a way that it's like you're not going to get lost. And that, you know, you're playing over like one of the first tunes on the second album is 5 bars of 5 is the form.
Interesting.
It never feels like, oh, I don't know where I am.
Yeah.
It's like, it like feels nice.
Yeah.
So that's cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Do you do them simultaneously? Do you think about the choreography as you're thinking about the sound and the rest of the composition?
Sometimes it leapfrogs. Sometimes you're in the studio and you're like, and you run over to the keyboard and you like, and then you like, sometimes it's happening at the same time. One of the melodies literally happened like it was the thing I was singing in my head as I was making the choreography. And so then I went over to the music score and I was notating it as I was putting together the choreography. Cool. So cool. It really depends. But sometimes it's nice because you get stuck on one aspect and then you just like let the other aspects see where it goes. And then I'm big into tinkering. Like I'll sit at home till 4 a.m. working on this rhythm of this melody or this little bit of this thing. And I'll be like, that's not it. Or, I'll like make a bunch of choreography, and I also use Ableton a lot. And so I'll have like the piano stuff that I've like played on Ableton, and I'll be like moving stuff around, but also I'll be like have recorded myself tap dancing. And so I'll have that in the Ableton too. So I'll be like you move little bit. Sometimes I'll like choreograph whole bits of tap dance stuff, but just using I steal a stomp from this part of this thing and a flap from this thing. And I like kind of put it together and I'm like, that's the rhythm I want. And then later I'm going to go make it.
Figure it out. Yeah. Interesting.
That's cool. I'm trying to imagine that. And it would be almost like then you're basically transcribing your own, you've never danced to this idea before, but you've created it. So then you have to look back at it and then dance it. It's, I don't know, kind of a funny workaround.
Yeah.
It's cool though. It's really cool.
And then the emphasis in the solos on this album is compositional. It's we're getting from this idea to this idea. So it's the soloist's job to do their thing, do the whole, but also they have to bridge this gap from here to here, which we don't get to have the practice of doing very often because we kind of just go out there and we do what we do and then we're done. But it's the show just started. So maybe it's not time for maybe it's time for something a little bit different. We just came out of this section that has all these scrapes and stuff. So what if we took those scrapes and that became the beginning of this section, and then that helped us get to, but those fall away, and then it becomes something else that helps us get to this next thing. So
when are you gonna stage it for performance?
What we just had to do was horrible. It was the stage version existed first, and then we had to go and because hopefully nobody notices this on the first album, but I'm also talking about it on here. So.
We can cut this out.
We can.
So the first album, which I haven't really talked about, Songbook, it's 6 jazz standards that we were touring around for a while with this band that is like so great. When we recorded that album, because it's like, there's only 6 of us and we wanted to get this like band sound, we recorded like no click, all 6 of us in the same room, like barely any gobos, tons of bleed, everyone's in everyone's mic, which is fine. Like that's how we wanted to record it. And that's like going to work really great for that record. But we had because all 3 of us were dancing at the same time, we had a bunch of boards set up, and because the way our boards connect to each other, there's a little lip. And so when someone like slams hard on one of the boards, it goes down and then it goes back up into the board next to it. So the heel drops and stuff, you can hear like, gong, gong. So on the second record, we recorded all the tap dancing already. We haven't recorded any of the band yet.
Interesting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, because we wanted to, everything's going to be isolated. We recorded everything with a click. Most of the things are through composed anyways. So it was like, there's not like a ton of reason to have us all recording at the same time.
Right.
Especially because the studio, we couldn't find a studio that had 1,000 ISO booths.
Right.
So we recorded all the tap with a click, but because we wanted to avoid the boards hitting each other, we recorded it on just one of the boards. So it's 3x3. So it's this huge dance that moves across the stage. It flies everywhere, all sorts of slides and stuff. And we had to make it a face one direction record, not go anywhere.
Right.
Yeah.
And that was that took a month and a half just to relearn the dance like that. But I was like, you guys, we'll never have to do that again.
Yeah.
We'll record it like that.
Right.
And then every time we perform it after that, we'll be using the whole stage again.
It'll feel so good.
Yeah, but then we came back in the studio and I was like, where do I come in?
Right.
I was on the wrong foot. Oh my God. So those 2 recording experiences have been significantly different.
Yeah.
We recorded the intro for the podcast in my garage. And this is the first time I had ever had any experience really recording anything. And it was the most humbling and painful experience in my entire life. I was like, I hate every single second of this. So hopefully...
When you're recording, you really have to totally shift. You have to think about all of the things that they just won't be able to understand. And you have to make all those sound so different from each other. And it's a totally different thing.
Right, because you don't have the visual input of oh, that was a toe versus a heel or whatever. Yeah.
I say to my students, I want your heels to be the heeliest heels and your toes to be the toeiest toes. They're I'm not talking low and high, but I want you to make the heels sound like the heels you want them to sound like, and record yourself and then go that's not what I want yet.
Right. Yeah, and I had never done that. I'd never record and listen back and be like, was that a heel? Was it a toe?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So lots of work to be done on my end, but I'm now that I had my first little taste, I'm oh, let me listen to all these recording now and see if I can hear it, so
You transcribe it from just listening.
Right. Or different, not even if I'm trying to put it on myself, transcribe it on myself, but even just differentiate it audibly,
I said on Travis's thing, I was talking about how I want to be playing transcribable lines. I want to, if someone listens to a recording of me dancing, I want them to, all the time be thinking about playing things that if someone transcribed it, it wouldn't just be 1,000
16ths. Yeah.
And then when I'm making choreography, being what two things drive an audience absolutely crazy about tap dance more than like 1,000,016th notes and everyone playing in unison? And those things are so powerful, and they do so much like heavy lifting. Like, how can you use those elements so strategically so that when they do happen, they're like an elevation or a release or like an arrival, or they're like a building, like how you can use those things because they just have such a visceral response. You can use those things to like really full effect.
As a technique, as opposed to like the main dish all the time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this. It's been such an enjoyable conversation. So thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
You've been listening to our conversation with Ian Berg. You can find out more about Ian and his company Subject Matter at subjectmatter.com and on the socials at subjectmattertap and at ianberg67. And you can now stream Subject Matter's brand new album, Songbook, wherever you listen to music.
If you liked our conversation today, please follow and leave a rating or review wherever you are listening. And if you'd like to support our work, you can do so on our Patreon, where we catalog our full, uncut interviews.
Our opening theme for The Love of It was composed by Adam.
Our midroll music was an unreleased original tune by Ian, with the working title of 12, which he plans on re-recording for his new Subject Matter album being released this coming summer. Our outro music is the jazz standard Mac the Knife by Kurt Weill off of Subject Matter's brand new album, Songbook.
Don't forget to follow us on all of the socials at Relative Rhythms, and feel free to send us a message through our website, relativerhythms.com.
Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next episode.